was the key. Ooh, fine. See? I just need to do the whole time. Yep. I know. Well, at least I got it. Like, and I thought having it preset to just do it itself would. I did, yeah. I don't know. We'll have to play around with it again tomorrow morning. I don't know. Oh, we have like one viewer. Oh, we have a comment.
My name is Mark Cohen. I worked at Carson. I got retired back in February when I wanted to say my story counted. So that's my history real quick. But when I was at Carson, we tried to do some, Joey, one of my guys, we started the OHV stuff there. Years ago, before we started getting resumes, we had a couple of jokes. We got a lot of pushback from the city because we were requesting that OHV focus we got a bunch of pushback from the city. So I don't know how that works. Is the city running the hill?
So if it's limit, it's so yeah, it's kind of there, but I want to say the county
the county and the city is the same thing. In the papers it said that events were going to be and we were looking at that. So that's what we got rid of. So that was the thing. So I was kind of curious how you went to be able to do that part.
So it's like the piece of land, it butts up to the BLM and it's on the outskirts of town. Even though it's owned by the city, it's not like within the city limits. So, at least so far, with their discretion, I've always just had them listed on my insurance policy as far as my organization goes. And then I basically just make sure that they're included, so they have all of my, plans up to date, just like I do with BLM. And we'll run through it and we have to hit there. Nobody's ever really like I'm about it. There was like a few council members that were not super sure of the idea. Some of them were like super eager and on board and making moves, but there was a couple of them that just needed to like we went up there for a little field trip and like kind of already it's not going to need to go through. That's
cool. I'm gonna. All my folks are switching to Carson City because I'm hoping as a player, I can bring that over to this side. All of our local on the other side of the But that aside, my big question is, Florida has is it going to start in this?
But I don't know. Tentatively right now. So I think like using the body like the things that like the matter of
well, I am all for it. I wanted to bring it back to right now.
I have a bunch of bags. I need to go over right now.
Yeah, like how we support and friends and
normal city around the city. But it's kind of a bit I'm for any kind of and I would like to be part of but as a retired coach, all my guys tell me, so it's all, but yeah, I really like to see about 2 forward games. One of the things we have both sides of the people right there, right side that hate anybody in the area is coming in. And then we have the tourism aspect that people want to come to see on the side. When I was a kid, we were out to Johnson Lane. Right? And my dad would drink beer with his buddies and he'd ride home.
Navora and myself from the residents is like in that area. They're excited about people, driving through. They're probably like a gospel. It's that kind of I think that conversations are happening. My take on it is like, okay, this is going to stop here, right? So the best thing to do is make someone do it. And then you take the everybody kind of
everybody's on here as long as it's so I think my daughter's it's a simple, it's an easy ride, but so after yesterday, all my friends started going with this. When I found out that we had such a high registration rate, we had no funding coming back to our county. So I'm all over it. I want to bring that funding and either the BCMC, the BCMN,
that's always what I say every year. If you see the organization like going and doing the right way, it's kind of like a purpose. They have other like big unique stuff because they don't, they all want to win. They want to, so there's that social aspect.
We did the pizza job that's great. That's pretty fun. We learned a lot, but I want to bring the talk to so many people who see about the So if the majority of people that are off-road users, wild horse fanatics or ATV fanatics,
It's hard to get through the season, so
yes. So, and that's, I mean, there's still, it's a big off-road community with all that. So I think you can bring responsible
I was just kind of curious
We had a little bit of some videos that were put together on covering some of the OHV issues. We had work for the next few meetings that we're putting together talking about some of the grant projects. After that, we're going to do one that was put together by one of our volunteers out of the Pine Grove Ghost Town at the cemetery where we just finished up there. We're hopeful on Pine Grove. Actually, you know what? Let's do yours, and I'll see Pine Grove today rather than tomorrow, and we'll go from there. So, awesome, enjoy.
All right, here's a quick video that Nikhil asked me to put together about some of our grant projects across the state. So,
Can't hear it.
As you can tell, we're flawless on our AV skills.
Well, at least you got the picture today.
Yeah.
We had trouble getting video yesterday.
And that's 100% increase from yesterday.
Yes.
So by this time tomorrow, we should have sound and video.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, teenagers.
It's,
all right. I can talk for a second.
Yeah.
So I have an independent media firm in
Microphone.
Las Vegas, Nevada. We tried it. We're going to get the Hello, my name is Laura. I'm also Laura. So I have an independent media firm in Las Vegas, Nevada. That's where I'm geolocated. And I have a contract to do the marketing for the state of Nevada off-highway vehicles program since 2016. Woo! Thank you, Super. It's been really fun, and we've had a great time working with the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Great Basin Institute, and all of the other people that have trail maps to try to get our website, OHV.NV.GOV, as exciting as possible. I tell everyone it's really easy to get someone to go to a website once, but to get them to visit the website again and again is a challenge. So we also do marketing and advertising. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it around to talk to all of the different law enforcement agencies in the room, but if you need advertising, if you need a flyer, if you need a social media post, I'm your girl. So come talk to me. All right, video ready? I think we're ready. Woo! Thank you, David.
I am really pleased that Nevada has a registration program, a grant program in place. We're very thankful that we were able to secure this grant and move forward with this program.
When we heard there was an OHV grant available to apply for, we decided to apply for that in order to help us get more equipment.
This equipment is very helpful in safely getting our folks in, safely getting our subject back out.
The Nevada Department of Conservation and Natural Resources is incredibly excited about all of its programs, but this off-highway vehicle registration program in particular, because we get to use these fees to benefit our users in ways that really excite them. This year, we hope to be able to pull out more tracks than we've been able to in the past because we're so much better prepared with the money provided by our OHV Commission grant.
We submitted a grant to the Nevada OHV Commission, which was funded this year. We're putting in flexible pressurized signs that actually mark the roads and the intersections.
The Nevada Off-Highway Vehicle Commission started the registration and titling program in the state of Nevada for the express purpose of the money that people here to register their machines comes back to the ground for improvements to off-highway vehicle recreation.
We are a full-size off-road club, and our registrations don't go into the funding for the grants. However, we're the manpower and bodies that want to be able to work and help because we all want to get along and play in our backyard. We decided to apply for a grant so that we would be able to work with signage up here, to be able to work together in cooperation with the people who want to come up here and enjoy the area. In our funding for this year, we were able to purchase an equipment trailer, 7x18 trailer. It's full of the equipment that we need to be able to place arsenites in the ground, and also has all the signage material that we currently need for the upcoming year.
I want to give a big shout out to, again, all the groups that have come together. There's so many places of what to do on a Saturday here in Las Vegas, so we came here to get dirty, get all this stuff cleaned up, pack it in. Whatever's packing, we're packing out. We can just get all that all around, and hopefully next year we'll have more people.
Well, it's a national monument. It's a 300,000-acre piece of land south of Mesquite. It's an area of tremendous ridges and valleys. The Friends of Go Butte received a grant from the Off-Highway Vehicles Commission that's allowed us to put up road signs out here. Historically, there weren't very many, and the ones that were getting old and hard to read. We have some different kinds of signs we're putting in out here using money from the grant. We have caution signs along the highway, so we have some blind curves and things like that. We have directional signs and also some information signs with local history and information about the geology and other special things out there. We've also been doing some road maintenance and with the restoration along the roads. We'll continue to do that. It's important with the storms and things out here washing out the roads that we get out and keep them open. I'd encourage anybody to come out here to go here. It's a beautiful, spectacular place. One of those real gems. There's something out here for everybody.
What you're seeing here behind me is we've got the equipment working the track. We're working the track work. We're getting the slope correct so that ATVs and UTVs can ride it safe. We in the Ranger District received a grant from the Off-Highway Vehicle Commission to reconstruct the Ranger Trail. The Ranger Trail was designed for ATVs, however, over time it's no longer safe. And we needed to create a trail that was good for ATVs, as well as widening it for UTVs.
I hear a lot of feedback from people who like to climb trails and ride on trails that there aren't any maps available.
Our grant for the Nevada OHV Commission's main goal is to go out and map all the trails available for OHV and motorized use in Nevada. There are tens of thousands of trails, and it's really easy to get lost, and having these high-quality geo-reference maps is really beneficial.
We recently received a grant from the state to buy equipment that will very much help us respond to that.
The plan today is for basically we'll have people walk away. They've never touched a dirt bike, have very little experience. They'll walk away as a somewhat proficient rider, but definitely have a higher skill level than them.
We're doing hands-on training with people who have decades of experience. You get that one-on-one with our DBA function. For the street participants, we get grant funding thanks to programs like the Off-Highway
commission, because a lot of people don't know that money is there for them. Today, it's fully funded by the grant and that OHV.
One of the things that makes Living Dale Trails great is the partnerships out here. It's Sealing in public land, there's also City Valley Fire, the new restrooms that were funded from the OHV program and partners in conservation. Everyone loves Living Dale Trails, and they really come together to make it better for everyone.
These schools are 100% grant funded. They're open to the public. They're free of charge. I would highly encourage the public safety agencies to reach out to the Highway Commission and take a grant.
It's a great opportunity. I would encourage any group that has an idea to pursue this.
So big shout out to anyone who doesn't know, but the registration program started in 2012 and now it's 2022, so 10 years old. So I always tell people who say, oh, you have better, Idaho's better. I'm like, oh, we're just getting started. So it's pretty amazing to go around the state and capture what everyone's doing. And if you ever have an idea for a video or marketing idea, please reach out to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. One of the interesting points to just point out is we are only 10 years old. And you look at every other state that has an OHV program in the United States, because there are actually some that don't. And there are actually 12 states in the United States that don't even have a registration program, much less an OHV program, and plenty for the work. Which, by the way, from a registration point of view, for the members of the commission and some of the work that we've worked on, we have reciprocity within a state that has, it's not even reciprocity. Nevada will accept the operation of an OHV for any registered OHV from any state. So it's not really reciprocity, it's kind of a one-way thing. But we have 12 of us don't even have a registration program, and it is nearly impossible to get an out-of-state OHV registration in Nevada. So we've cut ourselves off from at least a distance from those 12 states. Another topic for another day. I'm going to do a quick video here about Pine Grove, Nevada, and then we're going to hop in directly from that to talk with some of our land managers. For those who have not been up to Pine Grove is likely the most visited uninhabited ghost town in Nevada. It is in Lyon County in the Sweetwater Mountains. Oddly enough, in Pine Grove Canyon. Weird. We did a grant there, the Nevada Off-Road Association, Pine Mountain Trails Association, roughly $40,000 to do some fuel reduction, to do some litter cleanup, and also to add a barrier. And that's what this next video is going to be about. Unfortunately, our community, as well as other visitors who are there with street legal vehicles, were unable to tell exactly where the graves are in that cemetery. It's not uncommon. You're talking about graves going back to the second half of the 19th century that might have been marked by just a wooden cross or plate or headstone, headboard, that aren't there anymore. For anybody who is actually in tune with that historic, what you're looking at, we walk in and we're horrified because we can see the trails that are user generated, literally driving directly across the top of the grave. Driving across dead guys, no bueno. The other thing on it, which is how it came to our attention, is we got a call a little bit over 2 years ago now that some people had been taking wood off their surviving structures for their campfires. So, and during one of the cleanups, we removed a fire ring literally underneath the wooden frame of what is the old livery stable or blacksmith shop, depending on how you want to phrase it. So somebody had been camping in there, and I'm 5'8", and I could jump and touch the wood above it. So we went in there with some help from Tread Lightly and some of the other user groups and did some remediation work. A gentleman by the name of Scott Pitts did a video. The only thing I want to correct on the video before we get going is Scott says repeatedly, we don't even know who's buried where. We know. He didn't know. I'm sorry, Dr. Tice?
I would just say I have family members buried there. My great-grandfather was partners with the first governor's state of Nevada in Pine Grove. I've done good history lessons on that if you want more information. McDowell Historical Society, right?
Yes, thank you, Doctor.
So don't run over my great cousin, please, in that grave.
We're working on it. Let's see if we can get this to run here.
Together. It's a metal fence. It's all been prefabbed. Sticking it together, I'm going to use screws to go ahead and hold the thing together. And it should go ahead and discourage anybody from going through the, driving up through the cemetery. Driving across dead guys. Yes, we don't want people driving across dead guys. Helping as best we can. This thing sure looks nice. And this is an unbelievable coming together of folks from all different industries and organizations. We have trail organizations here. We have mining companies are represented here. And off-road racing is represented here. But this is what we can do to go ahead and keep our public lands from being shut down. And this is what we have to do in order to keep our public lands open.
Is it obvious that I have no children?
I'm going to take a walk up here into the cemetery. And unfortunately, this is the reason why we've gone ahead and they've gone ahead and put the fence up, is because there's so many of these graves that were just marked with wooden markers and things like that, and so we really don't know.
This area right here specifically is an unmarked grave.
How far
you can see the tread marks
a lot of
going
these
through.
markers go. People have actually taken care of quite a bit over the years. You know, unfortunately, we have, you know, graves like this one here and this one here. We got no idea who these people were, how old they were. But this one here, people have come up for years. And this young gal was 15 years old. People have come up and put these angels up here for as long as I've been coming up here. So a lot of people in the valley here still have ties to Pine Grove. This is one of the other reasons why we're doing this, is that, you know, you look at the few little headstones and things that are there. Well, this is a grave right here. And this is, you know, these are unmarked. I have no idea who these people were. Somebody probably does, but I don't. But because of this, you know, who knows? You know, in this whole area here, who knows how many people are buried out here? Who really knows? And there you can see down on the side of the hill there. And honestly, a lot of these some of these markers, especially down here, are, well, this one obviously is fairly current. But some of these flowers and things like that, I've never seen before. There's been a couple of years, at least 2.5 years since I've been up here. And so who knows how far down this cemetery actually goes. But these people should not be forgotten. Their graves should not be trodden over, nor driven over.
This is the most amazing part. The groups that work up there, obviously the Nevada Off-Road Association, Pine Mountain Trails Association, racers who have participated both in border races, Best in Desert, Legacy races, Friends of Nevada, Friends of Pine Grove, a citizen-led group. We had Nikhil's team from the Trail Ambassadors up there, just people who have genuine interest. And this is exactly, what's the word of the weekend?
Partnerships!
Thank you. That's what it is. Partnerships that allow us to do something like this. But perhaps the funniest thing, or the most peculiar thing, after this was done, we put up, probably linked to this video, there's certainly some photographs talking about the work that we had done with the money that we received from the Nevada OHV grant program. Within an hour, you guys are just closing off more land. And Laura, no, we don't want people driving over graves. And probably the first time since the invention of the internet, someone said, oh, I didn't know that, I'm sorry. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to take table 3, and we're going to bring up Miles from BLM, Matthew from Forest Service here in Carson, and Bob from State Parks, and see what they got to say.
How do you want to sit now?
I would say facing the room.
All right.
We have not met
I'm just going to let these guys fight it out on their own. Tim, do you have questions that we already went through? The question thing?
I don't, we can pull that up. Is that what you're wanting to do?
Yes, please.
Let's do that. Cool, thank you. Yeah, we can do that. All right, we just have to get to it.
That's right.
But think of it this way, it's not like we handed you blindfolds. All right, so when we first conceived this idea to put some of the senior leadership of what we see as the three major landholders, or land managers rather, we intentionally excluded Department of Defense and Department of Reclamation for two reasons. Defense usually will send a PIO who doesn't really understand the nuances of what we're doing. And also, Reclamation actually has no OHV trails on any of their land that have been approved. They have them, they're user generated. So we figured that these three organizations would send their best. Instead, we got, oh, I'm sorry, and what we got. But if everybody would just take a moment and introduce themselves, what they're talking, who they're representing, and if you want to take 2 or 3 minutes and kind of highlight some of your most focused OHV issues, that'd be awesome. And then we'll do a couple of Q&A, and hopefully get everybody out here by about 10 minutes after 11, so we can get some lunch, so we can go play with her. Sounds good. And Tim's got some questions for you. Yeah. And I'm going to go and work on getting some OHV rights stuff put together, but I'll be right back in.
All right, we'll start with, everybody hearing good? Yep. We'll start with some introductions and some background so you guys have some context on who I am. My name is Matt Simstein. I serve as the district ranger for the Carson Ranger District. For geographical reference, that's basically the eastern Sierra front from I-70, which is just north of Loyalton, all the way down to Topaz is the chunk of land I'm responsible for overseeing. My background, I've been with the agency 20 years. Most of my career has been in recreation and fire. 10 years in Salt Lake, managing recreation, ran the trail crews, did the Spurs rec. I managed all the ski areas, their permits, and we had an artillery program for avalanche control, and a lot of wildland-urban interface along the Salt Lake front. Kind of similar to what we're dealing with here on the Eastern Sierra, adjacent to roughly 800,000 people going from Loyalton down to Topaz, and trying to manage those mixed uses and be responsible for the resources that we're responsible for taking care of. So a lot of civil issues there. From Salt Lake, I moved down to the Norwood Ranger District in Colorado on the Grand Mesa, Padre, and Gunnison National Forest. I was the district ranger over the Norwood Ranger District, which is Telluride area for folks who might not know where Norwood is, southwest Colorado. Rural district, a lot of range issues, big timber forests, and then Telluride was its own animal. A community of 2,000 people that any given weekend would balloon up to 30,000, depending on whatever festival we had going on. So very different recreation issues than what we deal with here. I've been here since 2019, just got here a few months just before the pandemic shut down. So it's been a slow, gradual climb to get acclimated to the community and user groups in this area. Most of my time here has been dealing with fire the last 2 years, so thankfully we had a break from that this season. But certainly, kind of the main bread and butter for the Carson Ranger District deals along kind of 3 or 4 themes. One, wildland fire suppression. I've got a huge fire organization, roughly 85 people staffed under my chain of command to deal with that. 2, recreation management, 800,000 human beings across the Eastern Sierra front, all advocating for their own resource, sometimes which doesn't align with our mission of clean air and clean water. So we're trying to build out and expand that program to meet the needs and demand for infrastructure, and then also balance that with protecting our upper watersheds, which basically feeds the drinking water for all these communities across the Eastern Sierra front. Related to fire, veg management, fuels reduction along the WUI, that is another bread and butter for us. And then also, and then we service all the other programs, special uses, which can be anything from comp towers, gas lines, power lines, etc., to range management, to minerals, all across the board with multiple use. But I would say, fire, veg treatment in the WUI, and recreation are our top three things that we really focus down in on. In terms of motorized recreation, I would say we're kind of moving into unprecedented times where we've been adding more miles of trail to our trail system, both non-motorized and motorized, and within the last decade that we've ever done. We've got partnerships with Reno area dirt riders, which is, I think they've just kind of taken a back seat due to Lexi burning out, and have transferred that responsibility to who?
Sierra Trail Groups.
Sierra Trail Groups, where we're planning to put in basically the philosophy that I'm trying to connect areas of concentrated use. So we're looking at connecting Peavine Mountain up into the Truckee watershed, along kind of back behind that Dog Valley behind Peavine Mountain. There's some trail proposals that we're working on in that area. We collaborated with the Truckee Ranger District on an environmental assessment to add motorized single track coming down from the Truckee Ranger District down into mobile bird eye area to connect to our trail systems. So that's something that we're looking at doing and that we're collaborating on. And really across the entire district, we're really looking to improve the infrastructure, close down which conflicts with resource management and it presents watershed concerns. But access into these areas is something that's, I think, important to all of the staff and something that we want to be able to continue to support. Some of the areas that are causing significant resource damage for us that's kind of on my radar is obviously Peavine. There's just a braided network of crap out there that we got to get a better handle on. It's expanding daily, and it's basically coming from people's backyards as the community continues to expand there. Not all of it is I guess, compatible with the other resources we're responsible for managing. A lot of fall line stuff, it ditches out because it's not a sustainable grade, and then you get 4 trails in 20 feet span, all leading to the same area. I think we can all agree that that's probably not the best situation, and from an infrastructure standpoint, those trails probably aren't the funnest to ride. Maybe 2% are actually willing to do a hill climb this steep, and we're really trying to manage things so that the majority of our visiting public can enjoy them too, kind of like those blue trails if you're compared to a ski area, blue and green, I guess is what I kind of like to focus in on. Some other areas, obviously the hot springs down on the east side of the East Fork of the river, that's a management problem that's, I guess, been plaguing the district for the last 30 years. It has a long history there. And then the Mount Rose corridor, as it relates to winter travel, that's kind of a problematic just because of the amount of visitation, and there's just a lot of user conflict out there from the motorized community wanting to get in and get their recreation, but then also the conflict with the non-motorized folks trying to sled and competition over parking, and that's also a long history there. We've got some support from the state to kick off a master planning effort around the Mount Rose corridor to see if there's a better way to manage that. Some ideas, obviously, opening up the Truckee Meadows area for parking, trying to explore the idea of snow parking rides, kind of like we have on the 88 corridor, where we carve out some designated parking to provide places off of the highway that won't conflict with snow removal and other uses. We're excited to collaborate on that. The district's looking at grant opportunities to try and see if we can get a third-party consultant in there to kick off a master planning effort around the hot springs. There's different viewpoints from different user groups on how that area should be managed moving forward. Some want a remote setting that's only accessed by the river. Others, want a road and a developed campground in that area. I think we need to start off a collaborative effort to try and figure out what's the best way to manage that area into the future. And that's been long overdue. It's certainly a hot item for Alpine County and some of the other folks that are vested stakeholders in that area. So, as a whole, recreation's involved in the motorized community. We don't see as many ATVs on our 2-track systems anymore. It's more the UTVs that utilize our road systems or dirt bikes on our, that really kind of lust after those single track opportunities that we have. So we are not looking at going into travel management anytime soon. So the old adage of, the Forest Service is out there converting road systems that they can't maintain into non-motorized trails. That's not something that our ranger district's participating in. That being said, we have one road crew that we share across the entire state of Nevada. So for some, the deterioration of our road conditions, they love it because it's more of a challenge for their Jeeps and their UTVs. For others, it's problematic because they want to access those areas in their Prius. So, we get it from all sides. We're trying to keep things open and provide that access as long as it's not conflicting with our mission for clean air and clean water. I would say 99% of my staff are in it because of some affiliation that they had growing up to the National Forest System, whether it's hunting, fishing, dirt bike riding, mountain biking, skiing, whatever it is. That access is critical, and it's important not only to the stakeholders we serve, but to the staff that I employ. So I'm excited to be here. I thank the Nevada Off-Road Association for hosting us and inviting us to the table, and happy to answer any questions you guys might have moving forward. My first time speaking.
Seems pretty comfortable with it. So good morning, everyone. My name is Miles Gertler. I work out of the state office for the BLM. And I come from a little different perspective. I'm not in management. Our state director did want to come to this event, but got stuck dealing with wild horses at some big meeting in DC. So he really regrets it and sends his apologies. So that said, I do want to say I'm a dirt biker and I'm really excited about those trails in Dog Valley. Thank you for working through all the complications with that. I know it's not easy to do these things. So really quick, just a little background on my history. I've been in working for the federal government for 15 years-ish. Really came up through the Trails program. I started my career in Moab, Utah. So lots and lots of OHV trails, Jeep Safari, huge off-road permits, that sort of thing, as well as tons of mountain biking, and then wilderness and all the things that go along with that. And then I moved up into more of a supervisory role and worked kind of near Aspen, Colorado for BLM in what is a much smaller office, but really busy, lots of off-road use there too, and then combined with lots of other complicated resources there. It was a big oil and gas office as well, so trying to balance all those things out. And I moved to Nevada in 2019, right before COVID. And I started off my first 2 years, I was the Trails program lead for the state, and also was in charge of travel management and the special recreation permit program, so I know there's a lot of interest in that here. I can definitely talk to that today. But just recently I moved up into the recreation lead role for the whole state, so I cover a lot of different things now, including national monuments and NCAs, some of our busiest places in the state like Red Rock Canyon is under my purview now. And really my role is not a decision maker, like a district ranger or a state director might be, but it's to provide advice to the decision makers and also to help our field rec planners work through complicated situations and develop partnerships. It's one of my major goals. So, like you said, I'm very excited to be here. Coming from Colorado, we had a really strong statewide off-road organization called COFCO, and they really advanced the program. They got a much bigger grant program going. They got grants to the places where they needed to be. They were still advocates for off-roading for sure, but also worked closely with the agencies to find logical compromises to situations. And Nevada, I don't think has really had that, so I'm excited to see the traction that you guys are getting. So I'm excited to see the traction that you guys are getting, and I think there's a lot of different things that are kind of on the cusp right now, and I just really hope they can all coalesce and we can keep moving forward together. So thank you guys for having me, and thank you guys for putting this on.
Good morning. My name is Bob Rigel. I'm the administrator for Division of State Parks. I've been in this role for about 4 years, I guess, give or take. I started with State Parks as a seasonal back in 19, '87, and took a little brief stint into the Marine Corps and then came back eventually and started my permanent career with state parks in '95, so I've been here for quite a while. I think you could probably count most of my time, even in the Marine Corps, as outdoor recreation, since we did spend a lot of time outside. So I've been in outdoor recreation literally my entire adult life. So with state parks, we have 27 state parks spread all over the state, about 150,000 acres, give or take. Most of them have some component of off-road recreation, even if it is just accessing adjacent federal properties. So that's what most of our off-road recreation is. We don't have a whole lot of actual OHV trails inside of our parks, with some exceptions, but mostly we just kind of act as a jumping off point to get onto the hundreds of thousands of acres of federal land that we have. So happy to be here and discussing these topics. And again, we try to have a partnership with our federal neighbors, or whether it's BLM, Forest Service, or we actually do manage some DOR properties. And so, as was mentioned earlier, that makes it a little bit challenging for us to use those locations as kind of base camps, if you will. But we have worked with DOR in the past, like at Right Patch. We do allow OHVs there to stay on the main roads to at least access adjacent BLM property. It's a little tougher, like a lawn that's all BOR property, and there's not really a lot of access points there where people can go directly from the BOR property onto BLM property. But we do have some ideas down the road to try to increase some off-highway opportunities there also. So, as was brought up earlier, we have a brand new state park out in the Walker area. So we really want to collaborate with the Yerington projects. So I want to chat with you at some point later. So anyway, with that, let's jump into some questions. Happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you so much. So, while you guys were with your back to the screen, there's questions. Not all of them are going to apply to everybody. I mean, obviously, everyone's different, which is why we want to put everybody up together. But I wanted to direct the first one over to Nevada State Parks. Nevada State Parks has a grant to the OHV Commission for Beaver Dam State Park and some trail work that's done down there, and I think that's pretty amazing for a number of reasons, primarily because Beaver Dam is one of those places that you have to be going to get there. You're not passing it on the way. And I literally just passed a sign for it last weekend, and we looked at it going, damn, that's where that is. So, along those lines, Bob, so where else in the state of Nevada does the state park system need our help from the OHV community to advance your mission?
As far as where else we could use your help, probably any place where we have state parks that are adjacent to BLM land, Forest Service land, those type of areas that people are trying to access. Beaver Dam is unique in that it's the only state park that we have in our system that actually has a dedicated OHV trail that exists completely inside of the state park system, and it's a really cool trail. I just went on it earlier this year for the first time. It's a pretty neat trail, so if you guys get a chance to get down there, I would absolutely recommend going on that. So that's one of the few places that you can go. You could drive in there with your your toy hauler, get in there. It's a long dirt road, so don't blame me if your stuff rattles out of your cupboards. But when you get there, you can offload your OHV and you can stay just inside of that park, and it's pretty neat. Now you can also access adjacent federal property, and Lincoln County has a lot of really neat trails for either whether it's OHVs, whether it's mountain biking. There's a lot of really cool opportunities down there.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Walker comes to mind though as a place that we could absolutely use some help in the near future because there's a ton of OHV opportunities there, and we want to make sure that we keep people.
It was next, but okay, we'll get into it. Jeez. Get the guy a microphone. So no, actually, let's do that because I know that you are actually on a tight schedule today. Let's talk about the Walker River Recreation Area. There was a grant that was forwarded 3-ish years ago that didn't move forward all the way. And I do know Miguel is here somewhere that there's been some conversation about developing a dedicated camping area for OHVs, as well as an approved realistic trail that's going to bring you into some of the federally managed public lands that are both Forest Service and BLM nearby. Is that something that you want to lean into this community for to help advance that? And if so, how do you see our help, aside from the funding side, where we can add value?
I think advocacy is a huge, component of that. Just making sure that it's known that that's something that's wanted, right? I mean, I can propose, budgets or projects, but they're only going to get so much traction coming from me. At the end of the day, I work for the governor, and I'm going to support whatever budget the governor puts forth. So I will make the ask, but that's about as far as I can go with it. If we don't get state funding, then there's other potential opportunities there. We actually also oversee the Land and Water Conservation Fund program, which is a federal grant program, but it does require match. We don't have state match, and we're going to need some potential private donations, so to speak, to help, and or just labor counts as match also, so we'll use that. We do have the long-term plan is to put in an OHV campground out of Walker, more specifically at the Pitchfork Ranch. We already put in a really nice campground there that has full hookups, and another campground that's more primitive that doesn't have hookups, it still has a shower. But we want to put in an actual dedicated OHV campground that is built more with those in mind, right? Like with an actual OHV washing station, for instance, to help to eliminate some of that noxious weed spread and that kind of stuff. So that's our intent, but again, it's all kind of based on what funding comes in.
Awesome. And as your team moves in that direction, please have them reach out to us. We can get you saw the video on Pine Grove just a moment ago. We can get the bodies, and we can also do the NGO side of funding as well, where you may not be, because we are C-free, where we can apply for funding where you may not be able to get it.
That'd be great. While I still have the microphone, I have a whole bunch of business cards in here. So, and like I said, we have state parks all over the state. So if we have a park anywhere close to you, I was a little disappointed that I found out about the Pine Grove cleanup actually about a week after it took place. I absolutely would have had our folks out there. It doesn't have to be inside of a state park for us to help out. If we're in the community, we're a part of the community. We want to help wherever we can. So.
Writing down notes about free labor. Awesome, thank you so much. And like I said, I know that you're on a schedule. If you need to head on out, don't be shy. All right, so a couple other questions from the screen behind us. Let's talk about our newest designated rec area for OHV, Moon Rocks. And this will obviously go over to Miles. Incidentally, Miles Gertler, Matthew Giltner, you have no idea how many people in our circle constantly call us each other's names, so just for that. And even in emails, it's funny. It's like, doesn't my name come up when you text me? Anyhow. So, how can we improve the safety for the people that are using Moon Rocks, Miles?
Well, it's a good question. So, I was thinking about this on the drive up. So Matthew sent all these questions out ahead of time so we could think about them.
Ixnay on the TA.
Nice. Well, it was nice because it allowed us to kind of reach out and talk to their folks. So, all right. He sent them to me. It's because we're families. So.
Right. And they were in a greasy bag full of $20 bills. But you know.
So, Moon Rock sort of reminds me, I'm sorry to talk about other places I've worked, but in Moab, there's an area called Sand Flats. I don't know how many folks have been there during Jeep Safari. So Sand Flats, back in the day, was pretty lawless. Giant parties, guns, people running people over, fireworks, all sorts of stuff that was just dangerous, for lack of a better term. Probably quite fun, but pretty dangerous. And over time, there was a partnership that developed with the county there. And over time, what they've managed to do through increased law enforcement presence, through increased trail maintenance, and through development of facilities, they've managed to turn Sand Flats into an area that is it's just a really pleasant place to go recreate. Like, that's where Hell's Revenge and Fins and Things, those really famous trails in Moab, are up there. And now it's a wonderful place. People can take their families, go camping for a weekend. People can still have parties, have a good time, but it's just a much more friendly, controlled place. And that is the ultimate goal at Moon Rock. Some folks might not like that idea, but by implementing a little bit more control through facilities, increased law enforcement, and maintenance of trails, the goal is to shift the culture to make it more of a, just a family-friendly place for people to go. And I think what brought this all to a head really was during COVID, just the drastic increase amount of use that we saw out there. It had always been a little bit lawless out there and fun, which is great, but it became really a significant problem for our law enforcement and for the county. So we're trying to, through the grant through the OHV Commission, come up with some additional ways to help them out there. I'm happy to answer questions about Moon Rocks too, although we do have staff who manage Moon Rocks here as well.
Yeah, and I apologize for not saying this out loud at the beginning, but if there's a question that's asked that you have a subject matter specialist in the field here that you would much rather defer to, don't be shy. To hand it off to Paul. Sorry. Next one, and I'm going to use SRP as a generic term, basically any sort of recreational permit that needs to move forward, because I know the Forest Service uses different terminology or acronyms or whatever, because the government can never have the same thing across every single branch. Question is what's being done about illegal OHV events on federally managed public land? I'd like to start with the Forest Service on that, and I just want to couch this before we move forward, that we at the Nevada Off-Road Association rarely do not know about unpermitted events that are going on, because we're part of that community. The Nevada Off-Road Association will never tell the federal land manager about it. What we will do, however, is we will work with that organization to try to get them to permit as we're moving forward. Where we run into a little bit of a roadblock is when we meet resistance from the field office manager or the ranger or whatever, where they don't even want to have the conversation. So it puts us in this really awkward position, because our position is always to make sure that we have 100% compliance with the permitting process. And the reason that we take that posture is that we believe that having a permitted event, whether it's a poker run, a race, or what have you, creates a historic record of that particular trail. So in the future, if we have folks who decide that we don't want that trail, we at least have a historical file somewhere that there have been events that are moving forward. So from the Forest Service point of view, actually specifically from the Carson Ranger District point of view, what's our best answer? How do you want us to handle that? And what do we do about unpermitted events as they stand now?
So it's called special use permit is what we term them, SU. And we issue those for a variety of type of activities related to motorized. So a rec event would be more like a race type thing versus, we've had some events that we've authorized and issued permits for, like a jamboree where people have a camp spot where they all congregate and go out on a ride. We don't get a whole lot of reports on those types of events being ran legally on our district. I don't think their host is frequently given that we're all wild urban interface, and most of our trail and road system generates from neighborhoods, right? There's a lot of eyes out there policing our trail system and road system. So for the most part, I might be naive in saying this, but I think they're above board So I would say in those events where there is a jamboree being hosted without a permit, we'd like to be notified, of course, but I'm not going to just go knee-jerk and send law enforcement out there. I think we would try to work with that group to get them under permit and to do it above board. The most things that we're concerned with for those types of events is sanitation. Oftentimes you can't have 70 people in an area. We want to make sure it's an area that's already disturbed and hardened, A, so that we're not causing resource damage, B, we don't want a huge poop toilet burning around there, so we'll probably require them to either have access to our facilities and maybe some cleaning requirements there, or have them bring out porta potties and those types of things. We'd like to get them under permit so that we can put an operating plan in place and make sure that all of those resource concerns are being addressed and that the event can come off seamlessly. We want to understand what routes they're going to take. These are non-exclusive use permits, so you're going to have to share our road system with the general public. We want to make sure that I'm never going to permit something that includes a user-created route or a legal route. It has to be part of our emblem or part of our trail system. And so that's the way we handle that. I think what we get more frequently is illegal outfitter and guiding. Again, we'd like to know about it, obviously, and then we would engage those folks to see if there's opportunity to provide that service on our district, or see if it conflicts with our existing guides that we have. We're trying to make sure everybody's playing nice in the sandbox. And then, if there is that opportunity, because it isn't a service that we're already providing and there is a market for it, then we work to get them under permit so that it's being done above board. I think that's kind of our general stance on those issues. Again, it ties back to the other resources that we're managing and making sure that it's not conflicting and that it's a service that is indeed of value and that people are going to want to participate in or utilize. So, any other questions along those lines?
No, but Miles can answer the same question.
Yeah, so, it is difficult to catch everyone out there who's operating, and oftentimes people don't even know that they need a permit, or sometimes I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. So when we take the same tack, when we find folks that are doing something that's clearly commercial on public lands, our first course of action is to educate them and let them know that they need to be under permit. But sometimes it just takes time, like for example, for many years Burning Man wasn't even under a permit, and it took time to bring them on board and get them under a very, very large special recreation permit. We do meet resistance, and any help we can get from the community I think is good. Peer pressure actually really does help. The folks here who are running events are paying their fees and sticking to the stipulations of the permit. And in my mind, it's just unfair to have other folks operating, without those same restrictions, essentially.
That, by the way, is the #1 complaint that we receive. I had to get a permit. How come they didn't?
Yeah.
And that puts us in the awkward position because we want to we don't want to burn bridges with our constituency, for lack of a better choice of words. At the same time, we want to bring them into the fold. So, yeah. And Miles, why don't you answer this question of, is there any organizational plan that is in the works that might actually make the special recreational permit easier?
Well, so, yeah.
I'm sorry, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Speedier?
Yeah, exactly. Both. So, you mentioned the bills that are in Congress, but I don't really know what's going on with those, to be honest, but for now they're bills and they don't mean anything until they become law. But if they do, it sounds like some of those could have impacts to the SRP program for BLM, which I think would be great. It is complicated sometimes. Nevada is unique, for sure. Coming here from other states, the permits are just a different scale. So some of these big off-road events and just the number of events and the amount of public land makes it even difficult for us to keep up with the permit workload. So that's when I get calls from Matthew or from field staff when managers don't feel like they can issue a permit because of capacity. So that just drives me crazy. I'm not their boss, but I have a little influence over the program, and what we're trying to do is we actually just issued a contract a few weeks ago to hire someone to do one big statewide environmental assessment. Not quite statewide, it'll cover the southern half of the state to start with. And the idea would be, well, the end goal would be that we could authorize a whole suite of routes for different kind of OHV events, and we would be able to provide a map to people that come to us wanting a permit that shows all the routes that are available, all of the restrictions on those routes, like for example, if there's a seasonal closure on a route, or it's restricted to a certain type of vehicle or a certain type of event. So we could just give that map to someone and make it much easier to navigate the process. So that's the first part of the goal. And the second part of the goal would be, since we'd be doing a large environmental assessment, it makes it much simpler to authorize the events. There's a different mechanism called a DNA that we could use that would make, one, the process faster, and two, the cost recovery, which I know is a large hurdle, make the cost recovery less. Not non-existent, but less. So that's one plan, and then we've been talking with Navora about trying to develop a partnership to have them maybe provide training or something to help people navigate the SRP process clear. That's not firmed up yet, but I think we'll have it figured out next year. One other big thing that's coming is so the Carson district is a pilot office for it now, but BLM Nationwide is rolling out an online permit system called Raptor. And for those that have used it, I've heard reports that it's significantly easier. It's better for us to keep track of all the different documents and where they are, where the signatures are, where the approvals are in the process, and it just makes the process simpler. So we're still trying to get approval from headquarters, but our plan is to roll that out for the entire state of Nevada next year, which hopefully will make it easier for folks. But it is coming, and also I will say government does have a reputation of doing some things well, but especially computer systems, they have a reputation of doing poorly. But this one is actually quite good, I think. They did a good job on it. So it's user-friendly, everything makes sense in it. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm old enough to remember when we went to computers, so in the government.
Yeah.
Question for you, the statewide proposal for the events, is that pre-existing, like events that have already been approved, or what if a club or organization wants to create a new event?
Yeah, it could definitely be new events. So it's pretty early on, and eventually we will really be looking for participation from especially the folks that have events, to let us know what we call the proposed action is like the plan, to let us know if the proposed action is meeting your needs. We do have things to balance, like of course we manage other resources, but we'll be reaching out to possibly through Navora to get a lot of feedback from folks when the time comes. But yes, the idea would be new events could come in, and as long as they're using the routes that are approved in that EA, they could still do a permit under a DNA. And the other thing I'll plug is our state director really does believe in off-road recreation in Nevada and sees that it's a really unique thing here, especially the racing culture. And because of that, typically the cost recovery for something like this would be paid for by the proponents of the races. But he's eating all the costs of that to try and just get this thing through, partly because it'll help BLM too. It's crushing our field staff to manage all the permitting processes, so it's for us as well.
Awesome. I had two questions which were identical or near identical that came into our helmet out front in the last day and a half here. Basically, I'm going to read them both, and they're going to be different I imagine, for each of the agencies. Generally speaking, the questions are, what are the steps in creating and or maintaining an OHV trail? Those of us that work with this every day already know the answer, but not everybody else in the room does. Let's start with state parks. Can we create an OHV trail on state parks or maintain them?
So can we create a trail? Absolutely. So we have master planning processes basically we have master plans that probably have been in the agency longer than me since they were last updated. So some of them aren't necessarily super up to date, but even in those places, we certainly recognize that the needs or the desires in any particular park 15, 20 years ago aren't necessarily the same as they are today. So if there is a trail that's identified by the local users that are like, hey, go to the park staff and they say it would be really cool to put in a trail from here to there, is there a mechanism for us to do that? Absolutely, and it's mostly an internal thing. There are still some clearances that we have to do, but if we're not using federal funds for that, the clearance levels are much less. If we use a Rec Trails program grant, then the clearance levels go up once you put federal money on it. But it's probably, of the three of us up here, I think we probably have the easiest route forward for putting it in a new trail.
Well, let's find out. Mr. Gertler.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, the answer is similar on BLM. Yes, it's an option. And of course, not every acre is going to work for every type of use, so there's some places trails aren't going to work. But in general, the process would work like this. A club, possibly, or someone who's really interested would go to a local field office and just start vetting the proposal. And so you'd want like a GPS line on a map that shows where you want this trail to go, or at least an area where you think you might want to add trails. And you would just start working through the local field office to make that happen. There are hurdles, and the number one hurdle is our own staff time. So doing clearances, like for archaeological clearances or botany or wildlife, those people are stretched thin by lots of other projects like mines and transmission lines and things like that. So if you can come with money to pay for clearances, it makes it go a lot faster. And there could be grants in the state that could help with that. And just for BLM specifically, I'm just going to make a plug for this. But another major hurdle that makes it hard for managers to really bite on new trail systems is the fact that our resource management plans, many of them are from the 80s, and we don't, for the majority of the state, don't have travel management completed. And I know travel management is certainly a hot button issue, but just speaking from my own experience in other very heavy recreation use areas, when resource management plans and travel plans were completed, it really opened the door for new development. Certainly some things were closed or lost because of whatever conflict with whatever use or other resource. But it also designated certain areas like Logandale as being set aside as an OHV area. Or in Moab, there were special recreation management areas specifically for OHV use, and the same in Colorado. So in those areas, it was actually quite easy to start developing new trails, relatively.
Similar answer and process to Miles there, I guess. First, that's your idea with your own community. I'm probably not going to be too receptive to Matt's trail going from his backyard tying into our broader system of trails, right? We get that all the time, and it's a no-go. Where's it going? Is it going leading to private? Is it leading to areas that that you already know is a wetland? You're probably not going to punch a trail through it. Apply a little common sense to that end of things before you even bring it into our office. I think embed it through your user group. So once I get that idea and it's been vetted, the first thing we're going to do is vet it through our specialists. Are there any no-goes that have already been identified through past survey? I already mentioned most of our areas in the Bowie where there's already existing trails, right? So a lot of those areas in Peavine, Dog Valley, across the eastern Sierra Front out China Springs, it's already been surveyed. And we know where a lot of those cultural values are. We know where a lot of those threatened populations of Weber or Venetia or whatever are located, and we know where those no-go areas are that can kind of help shape your proposals. I'm not looking for, I'm looking for those things that connect areas, to be truthful, just straight direct, in the motorized world. So I'm looking for those areas that connect this pod to this other area where we have a concentrated use, system of trails. I think a bunch of stacked loops for the motorized community is problematic. because it's not really conducive to that kind of writing. I think it needs to be spread out a little bit more. So, on our district where we have a bunch of stuff that's already on the ground, I'm really receptive to the ideas of, improving our existing infrastructure. Maybe there's this crappy trail that could be great if we rerouted it and then maybe added some on to connect it to some other system. Those are the types of ideas I'm really receptive to. Obviously, we have trouble maintaining crews to go out and do the work on the ground. So if that nonprofit's coming in with, hey, and we're willing to adopt it and provide the maintenance after it's constructed moving forward, that's music to our ears. If it's a broader proposal where you're adding a bunch of segments to an existing system, that's probably going to be a heavier scale of NEPA and on the planning and analysis side. So being willing to chase a planning grant and either go third party or pay for some of that survey work on the ARCI side, on the Fish and Wildlife side, to be in NHPA and ESA compliance. We're subject to adhering to all these suites of laws that are out there, and it's not just NEPA. So, your willingness to help contribute to that. We've got models of doing that with most of the entities in this room, whether it's Carson City, Open Space, or RAD, or the Sierra Group. We are doing that. We have legacy of doing that. So it's not necessarily reinventing the wheel. I think good ideas that have been vetted with your own user group, and then bringing assets and contributions to the table to assist us not only through the planning side of it, but then through the implementation and then caring for that trail moving forward is what we're looking for.
Awesome. Go ahead, Miles.
So the one additional thing that I think is a big hurdle for managers sometimes is taking on additional maintenance workload. So if people bring trail proposals to any of the agencies, if you come with a commitment from a well-established club or a county or like a Parks and Rec district that they're committing to maintaining that trail going forward, it really can change the whole tone of the conversation. And I think that's where, I'm just going to say it. So I think that's where mountain bikers have done actually a better job in the OHV community, is they're more organized and have gotten commitments from like counties and park districts and the like to do maintenance going forward. So that's why you've seen a lot more of that kind of trail development happen. But this is, this is an organization for sure. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kim does have one question which I didn't understand, so I'm going to have her accent.
Okay, great. So I kind of had some sidebar conversation with folks about when we do NEPA, when our ologists, if you will, our specialists, go into literary research and pulling up information and references, there is a lack of published studies specific to OHV impact to wildlife or resources. If we move forward in that direction and found specialists or contractors or what have you that meet the needs of the agencies, is that something that you would be willing to engage in, where we do monitoring studies or impact studies of some sort?
I mean, from BLM point of view, yeah, absolutely. And that same conversation is happening around e-bikes too. There's not really good research out there about how they're different. So I think the more data, the better. And what it does is it makes the decisions easier for managers to really understand what they're committed to.
That's an interesting question. When I'm making a decision, as it relates to NEPA, I'm acting off the advice of my staff, which include ologists, so they're effectively consultants. They're developing their advice based on their training, their education, and a lot of that revolves around the published science that's out there. So if you guys were to engage with the Rocky Mountain Research Station and fund studies, I think that will certainly influence the advice that the ologists provide to me as the decision maker. I don't understand it. I'm not a wildlife biologist or an archaeologist or any of that. Oddly, the most deer that I see on our district are right behind my office in Carson City. I never see them on the forest. But we've heard our entire career that habitat fragmentation is a threat. And it impacts the species. That we're not responsible for managing the species, that's the state, but we're responsible for managing their home and the habitat that they live in. So, if there was some more in-depth studies on the other side that is peer-reviewed and objective, then I think it would feed into the advice and consultation we're receiving from our wildlife biologists.
Awesome. Bob, you have any? No? All right, so we're coming up on about 11:15 right now. Anybody else from the floor have a question quickly? And then if not, we're going to move on to the next part of our day.
I guess a question both for Matthew and for folks in the room, but also for the panelists. Do you feel there's a need for like a partnership guide, like how to partner, whether it's leading with stewardship or on new trail development, that's coming kind of from maybe from the agency perspective, but to meet the needs of the user community? I think that would be a helpful tool to have. So that
I can't speak for the managers, but from our perspective, and this is not meant as an insult to our constituency, but a lot of that stuff is probably best not done at the local club level, because we have a lot of people who try to move their agenda based on emotion versus science, and you weren't here on day one when I referenced the percentage of jackasses in the motorized off-road community, so everybody else has heard that. So what we're trying to do is get everybody to work collectively together, cooperatively rather than quite well both, I guess. So a guide would be swell. I'm not convinced that our constituents and our group would use it.
I guess I kind of feel the same way, that it couldn't hurt, and we have some resources. We have a trail development guide that exists. Partnerships are key to getting anything done in recreation. Other parts of public land management, maybe come with more money or different laws, but in recreation it really takes partnerships to make things happen. So if that can help get partnerships going and build trust, then it can't hurt, for sure.
Short answer is yes, absolutely. This is something that Brian and I have talked about, putting out a white paper that we can disseminate to our user groups, both motorized and non-motorized, to kind of touch upon things that I just talked about, what we're looking for in a proposal. So yes, I think that this isn't something that we would develop with any particular user group. I think working with a broader organization like Tread Lightly or a third-party consultant would be probably more appropriate. But at the end of the day, I think the people who are advocating for their flavor of use need to have some guidelines for which to operate within, and that would certainly be useful. There's other things that concern me since I got the microphone. I'm constantly hearing from my specialists, concerns over weeds, concerns over wildlife habitat, concerns over those cultural resources that are sprinkled across the eastern Sierra front. There's many tribes out here that hold many of these areas super to high value, and so I'm always getting concerns brought to me about trail density. So what I'm here to advocate for is that when the counties initiate these master planning efforts, we're certainly at the table for those, but the OHV groups and the non-motorized groups, that's the opportunity to kind of get your ideas on the map and get those vetted. Because at some point we're going to be built out, especially within the urban, the wild urban land or urban interface. And again, our mission is to protect those upper watersheds for clean air and clean water. And so we want to be able to make sure that the infrastructure we have on the ground, that it's like currently it's basically a mishmash of a few trails that we've designed, that are design built, and then a ton of road and trails that are just leftover legacy for mining access, to access this range allotment, this timber sale. And quite frankly, they're kind of crappy. Getting those into a standard that meets the use that we're providing into the future, whether that be dirt bike riding or mountain biking if it's non-motorized, hiking, equestrian, getting those aligned for how we want to use them moving forward, because they're probably not going to go back to mining or timber sales on the eastern Sierra front. Making that system awesome and in alignment with those county master planning efforts, I think kind of feeds into all of that, and then it'll feed into our white paper or whatever we produce for those guidelines of what we're looking for. Because probably bullet one is this part of the county master plan? or a collaborative master planning effort to where we have agreement so that when we go into NEPA, I'm not getting sued, right? That there's some level of support and agreement prior to going into NEPA on that proposed system or proposed trail. So just a couple of thoughts there.
I think that's awesome. Did you have?
Well, no, there's got to be other questions from folks.
Well, the downside is that we actually have a downside. The composition of the room is that we have a large proportion of professional land managers in one way or another. So some of the questions just don't come up because we already know the answers. That being said, it looks like we're pretty much done for the day with this section. And if you guys want to say thank you very much for standing on the firing line.
Sure.
And appreciate your time. And just in full disclosure, you were, as a Marine, kind of whiny about not having the questions. I would have thought you're tougher than that. But this guy didn't even know he was going to be up here. So you know. Thank you, everybody. All right, so the way that it stands right now, it appears that we actually have enough seats for everybody that wants to ride the second. That's pretty cool. Which means that this is going to be our last in the building time to chat right now, which means that, of course, that it is quiz time. First person to correctly answer. It doesn't work for the Nevada State Parks Department, because that would be cheating. What park in the state of Nevada is the only one that has a designated official OHV trail?
Beaver. Do I gotta read out loud again for the people that weren't here yesterday?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Danger, Bigfoot area, stay on marked trails. Please place all human remains in the black garbage bags provided for this purpose. Thank you for your cooperation.
All right, Michael from Battleborn, are you here?
No, he left to go get a few minutes.
Okay, so Michael from Battleborn Off-Road is our vendor for 4 4-seat side-by-side. I think the Polaris Ranger 1000 XP, I think, are not positive. We have individuals here who brought their own rig to put people in the passenger seat if they're a 4-door, or as I call them, the limo version. We have ground seats in the back. And we are also anticipating having some Jeeps, full-size vehicles. This is going to be something that you could do in a rental car, if I were the one renting it. That being said, I want to see everyone in the parking lot, probably 12:30, and we're going to be meeting all the way down on the far south part of the parking lot, kind of over by TJ's Corral in that area. Big white Ford truck with a gray trailer behind it. You'll see a yellow Jeep. I don't know if that's you or no, it's Kevin Bailey's Jeep. So let's be there at 12:30. We'll outfit people that need equipment, and we'll do about a 30-mile ride or so. And Arthur, I believe, is leading the way on that, aren't you, Arthur?
We're going to meet Mike Yost at another spot.
Right. So
he's
we're
law enforcement.
Yep.
My understanding, he's leading.
Okay, so we're going to caravan down to Stockyard Road from here. As long as we have everybody here, let me just do a couple quick minutes on just some safety issues and so on. While we're on this ride, it is not inconceivable, but it's unlikely, but it's not inconceivable that we're going to get separated. The nice thing about the Sierra Front and the Pine Nuts is, over there, you've got Joe's Peak. If something goes completely sideways, just keep driving downhill. You're going to hit the highway eventually. But what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that anytime we get to, and Arthur has some maps back there too. The other thing that we're going to do is that anytime we come to an intersection where it is possible that you could be confused whether we turn left or right or went straight, that vehicle is going to stop until they've made positive eye contact with the next person in line. And then we'll continue on from there. So that means that if Bruce is in front of me and I finally catch up to him, once we make an eye contact gesture one way or another, make sure that we have an affirmative handoff at that intersection,
Bruce can continue on. If I don't have a visual of the guy behind me, I'm going to wait until that guy shows up. I don't anticipate us actually having that problem because we're going to be on a pretty well-established mining road. It's going to bring us up to the Slater mine, which was closed 30 years ago, maybe? Something like that. And then heading over, and Arthur has identified a couple stops, points of interest, and not necessarily conflicts, but just some of the challenges that BLM has had to deal with. And they deal with it anywhere in the state of Nevada, probably anywhere where they manage our public lands. But give us an example of all of that. So 12:30, go grab some lunch. You've got restaurants here in the building. You've got the Wild Horse Cafe about, I don't know, half a quarter mile down that way. Subway across the street, Cooked across the street. Spend your money in Douglas County, then go home, and I'll see you over here about a little over an hour.
Oh, I